So, hello and welcome along to my special isolation interviews with the very fantastic Naomi. And let me get this right, Rakavina. Hopefully I said that right.
Super close, Rukavina. Like
Rukavina.
R, like you say a U, that's how you say it, Rukavina.
I knew I'd get that wrong. Rukavina, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome along to Hospital Radio Reading and to my YouTube channel. How are you?
I'm super well, thank you very much. It's a little cold here in Melbourne on this autumn slash very early winter. Oh no, it's June. It's winter afternoon, but have a hot tea, so I'm doing okay.
Now, there's so much to talk about, but let's start for you. Where did it all begin? Where did the sort of the love of acting come from? How did you get into it?
I started uh, in like a church group when I was, oh gosh, I would have been maybe 6 or 7 years old. And they had the church play on that my mum took me to see. And she's like, "Oh, do you want to be in it?" And before I'd gone, I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And then she took me to the church play. And I think I sat there wide eyed for the entire thing. She's like, "Do you want to be in it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to be in that." And that was where it all started, I think. And then when I went to school, I would do extracurricular drama. They had extra examinations you could do and kind of leveled from grade 1 to grade 7 or what it was. And I did that every year as well as doing drama in the classes at school. And then I did quite well in those as well as the extracurricular ones and through year 12 for us through the end of high school. And I got nominated for what was called a top act if you got kind of perfect sevens across the board for your performances. Um, and my drama teacher recommended that I go to a drama school when I finished high school. And he said VCA, which was the Victorian College of the Arts here in Melbourne, one of the top schools in Australia. And I kind of had that stuck in my head, I think, since I was quite young. And so I tried and I eventually got in after about 3 goes. I think it took me to get in there. It was a conservatorium training when I went. Um, and like nothing else I'd ever experienced, it was grueling, really grueling, really a dedication, one of my teachers called it. But it really set me up for an industry. And I thought it was, oh, there's nothing harder than this. I could never work as hard as this university is. And in a lot of ways, it was true until until a really big job that I just finished up on, which was a grueling schedule. And I'm really glad I had that rigorous training behind me so I could go, oh, look, if I've done that, I can literally do anything else. But yeah, I mean, there's a love for something. And that old phrase, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. And yeah, it's true. It's a bit of a calling, acting, I think. It's not just a job, because if you want to be sensible, you try everything else other than being an actor, because it's a hard gig. Like, it's really hard going. But that's how I started.
Do you remember the first time you performed in front of a crowd? What was that like? What was the buzz like?
Oh yeah, there's no time like showtime. And I've actually said that exact thing in another interview before, and I truly feel that in my heart. I remember sitting, it was actually probably for some examinations when I was quite young. I remember my mum used to come with me, and she'd always ask me, "Are you nervous? Are you nervous?" And I was like, "No." And I felt a particular sense of calm going in. I really wasn't. And I remember doing performances in front of audience when that time had come, and I felt the same sense of calm. And it actually took quite a long time before I would feel like stage nerves. And then I was always a bit confused as to why they had come a bit later on in life, even because I'd been performing since I was quite so young. And someone said something to me which I've held very dear, and I've said this to this day. Oh, you only feel nervous when you care. And it's not about being scared, it's about wanting to give the audience the best that you possibly have. And so if I feel a bit nervous for a show these days, but after a long, how many years has it been? What am I, 41? 28 years. More, 32 years, sorry. That's long. It's really long to still feel nerves, but it's a care. But I think the overall sense of feeling of excitement and underlying calm on that first ever performance was wanting to show something as clearly and as best as I could. I think that was what Showtime meant for me.
Now, one of the other projects you did get to work on was, of course, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which we've got our own production here in the UK. You were in, obviously, the Australian production. What was that like? Because that is such a big deal. I mean, I don't know if it's as popular over for you guys as it is here, but it is such a huge play.
Certainly is. And yes, it was as big a deal here as it is over there, I'm certain. Um, yes, what it was the most incredible experience to be part of, quite literally the biggest show in the world. For quite a few years. I was part of the show for 4 years. Um, and I was really involved in my time there. I think I was very fortunate. I did quite a lot. I had an ensemble role, but I was a cover for Hermione. And then when the Melbourne show after COVID went down to a one-part condensed version, as I think the West End still has the two-part show, but we had a one-parter. And then I actually took on quite a lot of responsibility. I was every female principal in the show as well. So along with Hermione, I also did Ginny, McGonagall, Umbridge, and I had Hooch as the ensemble role in the show. And it was so busy in that time. I really, really got to play every role quite a lot. I also played every onstage Dementor in the first, in our two-part version in Australia. And I was the vocal captain as well for a couple of years at the end of that show too. So I was really involved in the company, in the production. I did lots of different things. It was, I mean, you make sort of friendships that you'll have for the rest of your life because we did just so many hours. And that's actually the show I was talking about when I said that my drama school had prepared me for a really grueling schedule. That was the grueling schedule. We did 8 shows a week, 6 days a week. I had very little social life outside of work. I mean, we had great social life at work. We had hugely interesting backstage roles and that we made up during that show, and like great friendships and to go with. But yeah, I'm so glad I had a really good preparation to prepare me for the kind of hours that we had to do. And it was just, there was no end to our schedule at that stage. So it's not like a school term where that you work for 13 weeks and then you have some time off, 2 weeks off or whatever it is. We just worked all the time, and every weekend and all of the holidays we would work them because that's when all the people were free to come. So it was a lot. And in fact, I want to have a little shout out, if I may,
Yeah,
to
yeah, of course.
Jessica Vickers, who's Delphi in now on the West End in the two-part show there, and Gordon Miller, who did a little stint with us, and he was also from the West End production. So hi, you guys. But yeah, so that was a great time, a really incredible experience, but a really hard one, I got to say.
And I just want to mention, because you did mention this before we came on air, that also you guys did some amazing stuff during COVID, reading to kids in hospitals and stuff. So well done for that. What was that like to get to do something a bit more sort of down to basics, if you know what I mean?
I absolutely loved it. I would love to do that more often, actually. It was a beautiful thing to give back, but especially in Melbourne, I don't know whether you've heard, but in Australia we had quite tough. Some places had quite tough lockdown laws. Melbourne had incredibly tough lockdown laws where it was indoors all day. We had 2 hours outside a day. There was a curfew. You had a radius that you couldn't go out of. Away from where you lived. It was really hard going, and there was an email that circulated to the cast of Harry Potter and the Cursed Child saying, would anyone like to read to sick kids? And lots of people put their hand up, and we were given a book, and you would be allocated chapters, and you would read for about an hour at a time. You had a little bit of time to kind of read over your stuff and then do a live feed read. And all the sick kids who were stuck, they couldn't have visitors. It must have just been so isolating and difficult. And their families were so grateful, and you'd see all their little faces, and their parents, and their parents would write quite often because they were really small children if they couldn't write. Um, and they'd send their little love hearts while you would streaming, and they'd write little comments about this as the story went on if they liked. I did voices with all of the characters because I don't know, I can't help myself. So I did a different voice for 12 different characters in my chapter, and I do a different voice for every person. They're like, oh, that one's my favorite. But that kind of response, I don't know, there's something incredible about being on a professional stage and playing to the world, that undeniable, that's part of the job. But my God, there's something extra special about giving to those that may never get that experience otherwise. And it was so incredibly rewarding. And I think one of the best things that actually came out of lockdown for me was being able to do something for somebody else. You talk about how isolating is for yourself, but doing it for someone else was really like over and above what I could think about in helping oneself, was to help others.
Now we must talk about, of course, Neighbours, which
Yeah.
is become such a huge part of your life. The Varga-Murphys are fantastic. I had Riley on the show a few weeks back, who is fantastic.
That naughty son of mine.
So for you, how have you found your first year? I mean, first of all, how did you get into Neighbours? And then how have you found the first year so far?
It's great. I'm loving it. I love being a TV mom. It's fabulous. I got in it's not a very remarkable story, I'm afraid. I got an audition request, and I put my tape down. Actually, this is maybe a little interesting. My original tape was to play Kara.
Oh, okay.
So my audition is for Kara. And I had to do some building things. So I had a singlet on and some drills and all sorts of things. And I put my tape down, and I had sent that off. And for the first time in my life, I was a little more prepared because I was still at Harry Potter at the time. And our schedule was so busy that I asked one of the guys from the show, I was like, could you be my reader for this self-tape I've got to do? And I'm going to not try and squeeze it in over the weekend because we had to do 4 shows in 2 days and it's so hard. And he came to my house one morning, and it was great having him. He was so helpful, and we did a bunch of different takes and put it all down. And I remember getting on my scooter and going to physio on the way to the theatre. And I called my agent at physio, and I said, I've got this tape for you. The first time in my life I've done it ahead of the time. Usually I'm like, I'm so sorry, can I put it in tomorrow? I'm so sorry, it's late. Will they mind it's on Monday? That's always me. I'm 10 minutes late for everything. And I had done it ahead of the day, and I went to my appointment, and I came out, and I had a voicemail from my agent saying, oh, hey, don't worry about that Neighbours tape. It's not going to work with your schedule. And I went,
Oh.
honestly, it's the first time I've ever done it before the time. I'm like, well, you're going to send it anyway because I've done it now. And so that was that. And then I thought nothing of it, because you learn very quickly as a jobbing actor you put something down and you don't dwell on it, because if it doesn't happen, which is most of the time, you get very sad about not having the role. So you just kind of put it down and forget about it. So I did that. And I think it was, I don't know, maybe a few days or a week later, my agent rang me. He's like, hey, so Neighbours want to see you. And I was like, I thought you said it was too hard. And they're like, well, I guess not. And I was like, okay, sure. And so I went into the casting agent, which is less and less these days. You kind of just send things off. And I went in, and he said to me, oh, by the way, could you just read for the other one? And I was like, oh, when am I going to learn that? I was like, okay, sure. So I went in and I did that. And there was quite a few other Karas on the day. And we did all the thing, and I guess I put my best foot forward. I felt happy with what I did, but I didn't think it was going to be because of the schedule. And I left, and I said, yep, that's great. Oh, well. And then my agent rang me again. And he was like, so how are people going with doing other work during the show? I'm like, oh, I mean, and Harry Potter had to be released from them, an exclusivity clause. And I said, I mean, it's not unheard of. It's hard going, but it's not unheard of. He's like, do you maybe want to ask? And I was like, oh, really? He's like, maybe. He's like, okay. And he called me back like a day later or 2 days later, and he's like, "So Neighbours wants to see you again." And I was like, "Oh, why? What is? Do you have notes?" And he's like, "No, no notes. Just go again." I was like, "Do you need me to change anything?" He's like, "No." I was like, "Okay, that's weird." So I went back, and they had a different Cara and a couple of boys. A few Dexters were there, and we tried, and JJ Riley was there, and we were doing chemistry casting. And that moved very fast. Usually, chemistry casting is at the very end of what can be a really long process. And I was like, oh, this feels like the end of the road, but I thought my schedule wasn't going to be a thing. Uh, and I was like, wow, this feels pretty. I was like, wow. And I had felt very good about my performance, which is, it's not often you're like, gosh, I should have done that thing better. It's not often you feel like solid about it. And I was like, well, if they don't want anything different, I guess I'll just go and do what I did again. And they chem tested our family, as you see it on TV now, on the day. And they were taking lots of photos of us. And I was like, this feels pretty good, secretly on the inside. And I was very like, oh, well, thanks so much for having me, on the outside, of course. But inside, I was like, I think this might be close to the end. I think. And then my agent asked if Harry would release me for this, because there would be a 3-month crossover of both jobs if I got it. And very kindly, the producers agreed, because Harry Potter, we had been told at that stage that we were going to come to the end of the run of the play. And they said, I don't know how we're going to manage it. And Neighbours had said, I don't know how we're going to manage it. And I'm so grateful that both production companies, they worked together. I had hard outs at Neighbours to get me to Harry Potter, and I had annual leave scheduled for the entire duration of that 3-month period, which means I had whole days off that I could do Neighbours and have 1 day of rest only. And I think I did about 16 hours every day for that 3-month period. And I had 1 day that I would fall apart. And then I'd just suck it up and I'd go back to both jobs. I'd never do it again, but that's how that came about. I guess it's not boring, is it?
No, so that was a really good story. Now, obviously, when you first met Sara West, who obviously plays Cara, had you ever met her before? Had you worked together before? Because the chemistry seems amazing on screen. I think people love seeing you guys together.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. No, I met the second time I went back for that casting in the casting agent's office. Sara was there, and they'd brought back a different Cara. They obviously weren't happy with the first one, or hadn't found exactly what they were looking for, perhaps. And she was there, and we just sort of talked in the waiting room. I was like, oh, hi, I'm Naomi. Oh, yeah, hi, Sara. I'm like, oh, have you come to any of these before? And she was like, yeah, I did some a few months ago. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What about you? And I was like, no, I just last week and whatever else. And I was like, oh, okay, anyway, so cool. And they like called us in, and I think we maybe had 3 or 4 minutes to chat beforehand. And then we went in, and like, I'm quite a tactile person, so I don't find it awkward to physically touch another actor if it's called for in the scene, which our audition scenes were called for. In fact, our audition scene was when Remi's trying to convince Cara to buy Toadie's house. She's like, oh, the house across the road is for sale. So that aired a long time ago, but that was our audition scene. And so I was like grabbing her hand and like holding her face, and I did all of that in the audition. And I think that was the chemistry that they really liked, and which we have brought into the show. So no, cold, met in the waiting room about 3 minutes before we started.
And of course, Remi being a doctor, is that something you think you would have ever done, or is that completely out of your comfort zone?
Absolutely no way. No way. My mother is thrilled that I'm a doctor in some form in this world. I said, Mum, I got this job. I'm going to be a doctor. She was like, oh, a doctor. No, I don't think I could deal with the medical goo. Like, I don't mind, like, you know what? I'm going to give a little bit of credit. Someone got hit by a bike in the street, and my partner and I were standing right there. The bike was hit by a car, and they came off, and she was screaming bloody murder, this poor woman that got hit. And was in the afternoon. There was quite a lot of people on the street, but everyone froze. And I ran out. I was the first responder, and I yelled to my partner, like, call the ambulance and all the other things. And I went out there, and I didn't think anything of it. And later on, after they had come, he had said to me, you were so quick to act. And I thought, was I? I didn't really think about it. So I don't know, maybe I have some sort of response in me for that kind of thing, but I can't, any kind of broken bone and stuff I'm fine with. I cannot, even on TV, and I know it's fake, to see like a scalpel cut when it's really clean. Ugh, I just, so I think that rules out any kind of medicine practice for me. I can't look, I cannot look. It makes me feel so unwell. So I just have to stick with being a pretend doctor, if that's okay.
And do you quite enjoy learning all the kind of medical jargon that to most people would just fly over our heads? Is that quite fun to say all these funny words?
It's really hard. There's just there's no context for like a lay person like that. Like, I don't know what riptotrism means. Like, well, often I have to go to Google Translate and be like, how do I pronounce that? And what is that thing for? And then I have to look it up and be like, what's that medication for? And am I saying it correctly? And sometimes the writers actually write a medication sounding word that is pretend, because it can't be like advocated for, I guess. But I have had that before. I'm like, what's this for? And they're like, oh, that's not a thing. And I was like, oh, okay, good. So I can't be saying it wrong then. It's tough. It's really tough when you have no idea at all about something. I like to sound like I know what I'm talking about though, so that's good.
Now, obviously, I imagine when you get to work first thing, does makeup take a while? Because obviously you've got your hair down at the moment, but obviously Remi's hair is quite big. So how long does that take to kind of get into character?
Well, I guess you're getting a little scoop ahead of the show at the moment. This is my new hair in the show, so it's quite long and braided. So there's a bit of a storyline coming up where Remi gets her hair changed, and you'll see it like this much more. I think it airs, June this month. So that's coming. But makeup and hair, or as a whole, I have 1 whole hour in the makeup department every day. She did not wake up looking cute. I look like a different woman, and our makeup department is so good at their job. I get there and I'm like, hello, and I leave there and I'm like, okay, be a doctor. They're wonderful. I can't shout out to them enough. Thank you very much, ladies, for making me look good, because it's close-ups.
Now, we also have to talk about the really emotional scenes when Krista lost her baby. And those scenes that I found really touching was the one where Remi sort of, when she's out of sight, kind of has a little breakdown. I just thought that was amazing. Was that written into the script, or was that something you decided on?
It was written in, yeah, it was written like that, Remi always has a very professional front. She always keeps it together. But in private, that's the time that she can crack. That was genuinely a very tough day. I haven't lost a baby personally, but it has been in my family, and that experience was really, really difficult. And we had quite a few meetings prior to shooting that about, and if there's any content that's difficult for any of the actors or staff at the show, there's always support available. And that was a really hard one for me to get through, just because of what's happened in my family. Oh my goodness, it was a really tough day. I've got to say, Magella was just 10 out of 10 excellent. She was just so wonderful, and we were a great support for each other that day. Like, obviously the burden was on her to be the focus, but I personally found it really challenging. Yeah, so the little break wasn't that far from the truth. But gosh, she did a wonderful justice to that storyline, and I really hope that anyone who has had that experience felt visible, and felt like they weren't alone, because it can be quite isolating, and felt like it's a real story that we want to show and highlight, because there can be feelings of isolation or just devastation in a very private way, which I completely understand. yeah, but having it out there was a really special story. So I really hope that others found it heartening, not just difficult.
Now, if you were to meet your character in real life, so if you were to meet Remy, do you think you two would get along? Do you think you'd be friends?
Oh, she's so reasonable. I think Naomi's way less reasonable than Remi. I'm a bit like, no, I'm done with that. Where she's like, no, no, let's look at it from every side. Uh, you know what? I'd probably want Remi to be my older sister. She'd be insufferable though, honestly. I'd be like, oh my God, you're so moral. What? Um, but she's good hearted, man. She loves her family. Whew. And friends, like really loyal. Maybe, yeah, I reckon maybe we'd be friends. I think I'd find her annoying though.
And also, what's it been like being part of the first, sort of regular lesbian couple on the show? Because I can't believe it's never been done until now. So you must feel so honored to have been able to bring that into the show.
I am really thrilled to be able to be part of the representation of a queer biracial family. I think all of the visibility of having families that look like what families look like in the real world is right at the top of my list. Um, it is so important to me to be able to uh, help normalize that on our screens. I wish I had been able to see someone that looked like me when I was little, watching the shows on TV. There was no one that looked like me, and it was. I remember the first time I saw an actress that looked like me. It was actually on stage. It wasn't on television. I remember the first time I saw an actress look like me on television too, and it was like you were allowed to dream to be that thing when you had your own representation. Um, and I remember thinking, oh, it's possible. The job that I want, it's possible. It's not just this pipe dream. Um, so I hope that I can be that little person for another actress from a minority group that wants that kind of visibility, or to be able to feel like they can have that job too, that it isn't without out of reach. I am not part of the queer community, but I'm absolutely an ally, and it was really an important question for me when I was given the job. Is it okay for me to be that representative? Am I taking a job away from someone whose lived experience that actually is? Should I be doing that? I had a lot of consultation with other actors, the directors, producers, and then absolutely with queers and lesbian people, and like just the LGBTQA plus community. I have lots of friends, and I asked a lot of people, how do you feel about this? What do you feel about this situation? And a lot of it, there's circumstance in there that isn't just about lived experience, which I think should be at the top of the list. But then there's, can you find chemistry? Because the pool is not very large when you need a very specific minority group, especially in the acting community. Historically, there hasn't been enough jobs for minority actors to sustain that as your profession. So when those jobs come around, a lot of people have gone, I had to get another job and I now can't walk away from my other life because there hasn't been enough opportunity. So is there someone else that can play the role? Are they even available? Do they have chemistry with the other actor? Do they look like the fit? There's so many moving parts. So out of all the consultation, there were no major objections to me being part of that representation. And Sara is queer, and it was really important for me that I could have someone at hand that I could ask things to. I mean, there's way more than Sara, and the resource that I have is really immense to be able to, when I have questions. But I am of color, if you hadn't noticed, and so I can I do have that side um, of the minority casting that was necessary, or that they wanted, which I'm thrilled to I'm thrilled to be that person that other little humans that go, that's what I want to do, can have a representation of those people in the world that are doing the job, that it is possible. You don't just have to be that Western idealized version of beauty that we've seen for a long time. You can make it too if you look like someone else, and queer and biracial, and um, um, if you have a disability, if it's just, I think I have found personally that Neighbours does a fantastic job of really representing diversity, and not just in a token way. Like, you look around and you see the way that I often watch Tim Kano be Stephen Daniel's son. So you see Leo be Paul's son. And I love that those two, that's another family on the street. And I love to see that there's another biracial family. It's not just the one biracial queer family. There's actually another biracial family, and there's actually a number of them. There's also Wendy and they have Sadie, and Wendy and Andrew have Sadie. There's another one there, and then there's a lot of gay and lesbians on the show. Like, it's representative.
But yeah, so I mean, obviously, there's been so much on the show over the last sort of year or so since it's come back. I just wanted to briefly also talk about the fact that the show has been nominated for a National Television Award here in the UK and for an Emmy in America. How does that feel to you guys as a cast, knowing that the show is
Amazing.
reached? It's amazing.
I'm sorry, I couldn't even let you finish the whole question. It's so wonderful. It's so exciting. Our little show in Australia is like beaming internationally and being recognized. It's so fantastic. I'm thrilled. It's so cool.
I was going to say, I mean, for you guys, when you hear that sort of news, I mean, do you sometimes forget that the show is beamed all around the world, or do you kind of have that in the back of your head?
Um, I have people like, one of my best girlfriends lives in the UK. My mother-in-law is Canadian, and so there's reach. So there's reach that your friends and family around the world are like, oh, I see you. I had lots of friends sending me photos of myself on bus stops around when we relaunched, and there was your photos of us on billboards. So you get that little reminder, but by and large, it's just you at home going to work. You forget that it's really genuinely an international audience. Yeah, so when you hear that kind of news, you're like, oh my goodness, what? I can't believe it.
And I was going to say, one of the other things we must just briefly talk about is, of course, the trouble that JJ's been getting himself into recently.
Yes.
As his on-screen mother, do you kind of feel like you sort of you want to protect him, or are you quite enjoying these storylines at the moment?
Oh, well, look, Riley Bryant is just the most divine human being. If I don't have a son like him, I don't want it. Like, he's just such a gorgeous human, and he's so far away from how naughty JJ is. JJ, however, want to see the back of that kid. He just couldn't cause more trouble, honestly. Furious. So glad we have two of them. We'll keep Dexter. He's the good one. No, I think he deserves to have to go through all of his punishment. If he's behaving badly, he's got to wear it. So I actually think the mums are too lenient on him sometimes. He needs to work a bit harder to make reparations for his bad behavior. But yeah, there's such a disparity between JJ and Riley. Sometimes it's hard to to remember how naughty JJ is.
Do you get to socialize much as a family outside of the show? And are you kind of like a family in real life?
Absolutely, yeah. We developed a really strong bond, the four of us, quite quickly, and I'm so grateful I started with them. It would have been so daunting to begin on your own, and so we spent quite a lot of time when we first launched, because all of our storylines were together. And we have a family group chat, which actually Marley Bryant, Dexter, he set up. So, which is just so sweet that then he was 13 when we first started, that he would want to have a group chat with us, us oldies anyway. And Marley and Riley have a real bond, which is really gorgeous. And Sara and I and the boys, both we have really strong bonds with the boys, really care about them. During the big Christmas break, I thought about them all the time. Like, it's just so we'd check in with each other, send photos, we send funny little memes to each other. Yeah, I know that we talk about like Riley doing house sits for when we go away to look after the dogs, and Sara does that with him, and we buy each other birthday presents, and they're so thoughtful. The boys are so thoughtful. They've bought us the most gorgeous birthday presents, and we would buy for them as a group, like we buy each other little family presents. It's just, they're fantastic human beings. I couldn't want for a better family on screen, for sure.
Now, going forward, obviously, we don't want too many spoilers, but what would
Yeah.
you love? What would you love to see for Remi going forward? How would you like to see her storylines revolve or sort of go forward?
Um, I would love, I mean, this doesn't exist, so I'm just telling you my hopes and dreams. And maybe if the writing team are listening, maybe you could just saying. I would love for there to be like a medical rescue. I think that'd be really cool. Maybe if I have to do some, I don't know, like a cliff rescue or something. I'm abseiling down to help people out, and I don't know, do some CPR on a rock ledge somewhere on a hiking trail or something really dramatic. It's been a while since I've done some stunts, and I think I'm missing a bit of my aerial and physical theatre or just physical performance stuff. So I think that'd be really cool. I would enjoy that very much. Sorry, I keep jiggling around because we're losing light here, and I don't want to stand up to the lights on, so I'm just like sitting in the window now.
Now, I just have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You're welcome back anytime. But before we go, is there any messages you'd like to give to the patients listening, or to the amazing medical staff who are just working tirelessly? What would you like to say to them?
I am eternally grateful for the medical profession and the people that enable it to be there. If anything goes down, we are so blessed in the Western world to know that we can make a phone call and someone will quite literally rush to our side. And that is not true of everywhere in the world. We are incredibly blessed to have such resource by us. For those that have illness or chronic pain or having a really hard time at the moment, I'm sorry. And I hope that there's small happiness that you can cling to while you lie there, or have things done, and that you're just not by yourself. I know it can feel very isolating and very lonely and feels like you're never going to get better. But my own mum, she went through a really difficult cancer treatment year before last. I've got a quick story about this. And I wish this kind of luck, light, and happiness to everybody. So my mum got diagnosed with a cancer, and it was really scary. It's only my mum and I felt like I was going to lose the only family that I have. And it was terrifying. And my mum is very scared, and she didn't want to get the surgery, and we had fights, like terrible fights, which is even worse when someone's sick and then you're screaming at them, that she had to go and do it. She had to. I simply wouldn't let her not go and get help in the way. And she was genuinely just frightened. She was frightened that, I guess, that she would die, or I'm not sure. Anyway, so we had lots, and she booked a surgery and she cancelled it. And she booked it and cancelled it. And that happened 4 times. And it was honestly so draining to be so worried and want her to have help. She did it. And it was routine, and she was just the best case scenario to get better. She's made such a great recovery. She's completely cancer free. It's been over a year. So at that hospital, when she was there, she subscribes to it's called the Royal Melbourne Hospital Home Lottery. And you buy the raffle ticket, and money goes to, there's great prizes, and the money goes to wherever it goes to, good causes. So about a year later, she went for her checkup. She'd been through all of her checkups, and she had a big one coming up, and she rang me at work one day, and I was at Neighbours in the morning really early, and she was like, And my mum can be a little bit gullible, and people just like, I think I can get a 99-cent iPhone. I was like, no, don't give them your details. Just don't do that. And of course, she sent me a message being like, I think I just won a car. And I was like, Mum, don't give anyone your things. So I went to set and I came off, and she'd sent me this long message about she's won an Audi. And I was like, oh gosh. So I rang her. I was like, what's going on? She's like, I've won a car. Susie from the office has called me. I'm like, from what office? Long story short, my mum won a car through the Royal Melbourne Hospital home lottery. She's like, well, I didn't win the house, but I got a brand new Audi. I was like, are you joking? And I looked it up independently I said, send me this email, send it to me. And I did an external search, and I was like, no way. And it comes up, and Rukavina is my surname. It's not, it's not Smith. It's you can see if it's you. And so I went up there, and they have the initial of the person and their name up there. And I looked at it, and there's a little icon of the car, and they showed all the prizes and then all the winners' names with their next to the prize. And I looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, she's actually won a car. I couldn't believe it. I nearly fell over. And I called her back, and I was like, Mum, you won a car. She's like, I know, that's what I told you. But I said to her, so 1 year ago at this hospital, you had cancer, and now you have a car. I'm like, this is heaps better. So the point of my story is, so much can happen in such a short time. And when you're scared and worried about your health and you're in the hospital, who knows? Who could imagine that a year later you'd be moving away with an incredible, wonderful prize? So I really hope that all those people that are in the hospital feeling helpless and scared, who knows what can happen in the next year? And I wish you all the luck and light that you get the equivalent of a brand new car, and you get to leave the hospital, and your life is all the richer for it.
Now, Naomi, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like I said before, you're welcome back anytime. Thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thank you so much, Matthew. It's been wonderful. Anytime, I'll come back. And I'm so glad that you do this for everyone in the hospital. And I hope that it's been, I don't know, a little hour of thinking about something other.